I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, September the 26th, brought to you in part by Macrocin. Macrocin is a bold, straight shooting telithromycin injection that does what it's supposed to do for you, for your cattle, and for your bottom line. No BS. For more information, go to macrocin.com. In Joplin Regional Stockyards, where they're going to have 4,500 head for the regular Monday auction. I tell you what, guys, these runs are just going to be lighter. There's not that many cattle around, and they're just lighter everywhere. Even your high volume Monday sales like Joplin, 4,500 this time of year would be a pretty light run for them. They are going to have a special cow sale here coming up October the 12th. They've been having really good special cow sales, and they've been featuring those once a month, so don't forget that. If you got some to consign or you're looking for some replacement kind of cows, be sure and take a look at that October the 12th special cow sale. Joplin Regional Stockyards be at 4:30 in the afternoon. Cattle on feed higher one last time maybe. We keep looking for these tighter numbers of cattle to show up in hard print, something that comes across from USDA. And we continue to see cattle on feed reports that say we have more cattle on feed than we did a year ago. But I suspicion to think that this will be the last one that we have for quite a while. We've been having them higher and higher, over 100% for a long stretch here. And now we're getting to the point where we've got fewer cattle on feed. Now the report said we got more cattle on feed than we did the same time a year ago. But our placements are becoming quite a bit lower, and they're going to be lower going forward by a lot. And in fact, even though we do have several cattle on feed, and we've had record cattle on feed because we didn't have anywhere else to put them because it had been so dry, last year in the northern plains, and then this year in the southern plains, that's the only place cattle could be because we had no place to put them outside the lots. That's why our cattle on feed numbers have been so big, or part of it. But now we're getting to where our placements have been lighter, and they were over 100% this time, but they were mostly light calves that were coming because we had so many cattle displaced from Texas and even southern Oklahoma and Arkansas and places like that. Like I said, you don't have any other place to put them. So whenever they sell, we don't have any forage to really graze. So whenever people buy those light cattle, they're putting them on feed somewhere. And so it counts as cattle on feed. But I do believe when we get to the report next month, I think we'll have less than 100% cattle on feed. And I think our replacements are going to be lighter, and I think we're going to be that way for quite a while. And that's going to be hard print. That should be positive to your futures market when we get to that point. I don't think this cattle on feed report that we had Friday is really going to hurt your futures that much. It was, the placements come out a little bit heavier, but overall placements really weren't that heavy total, and it wasn't even enough to move your on feed inventory to a higher percentage point. So I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. But cattle on feed report indeed that I've been talking about come out on Friday, and what it said was our inventory numbers on September the 1st were 100.4, basically the same as what they were the same report a year ago. And your average guess, or your average of the analyst guess, was 100. So I mean, basically it was the same. So even though our placements were a little bit higher, they weren't enough to move it off the mark. Placements come out to be 100.4. Your average, the analyst guess, was 98.1. So that sounds bearish, and I guess, yeah, on the surface it is. But when you get to going in there and looking, you see that almost all the gains in numbers were on cattle weighing under 700 pounds. And so our main weights that we place on feed, your 7 to 8 weight cattle, they were lighter. And in fact, cattle that have been on feed 120 days or more, they're lighter. We're getting into a time when we're going to have really tight numbers of market-ready cattle. We had really good marketings that come out on the cattle on feed report. Your marketings through August were 106.3 which is more than the average analyst guess, which was 105.9. So that ought to offset that little bearishness that we saw in the placements. So I would think that we're going on, like I said, in future cattle on feed reports, those numbers on feed and placements are going to be under 100%. But I guess we'll see. These cattle just keep magically appearing everywhere. But tell you what, we continue, and I told you on our last visit that from January through August, we slaughtered more females than we did males. That doesn't happen. And that's why I say that, I put it into a hunting analogy. Whenever you're wanting to thin the herds down, that's when you shoot the does. But if you go to shooting a lot of does very many years, it's not going to be very long before you have nothing left to shoot. So you guys that are hunters know that. That's why we only shoot the bucks, because the bucks can cover several does, but you got to have those factories to make those animals, and we've been killing the cows big time. And and the dairy cow slaughter's actually been lighter than it was a year ago. But still, those are important numbers to keep in line. Give you an update on Cattle Price Discovery and Transparency Act. You guys think, well, it's getting here the end of September and it's dead. And well, now we've got continuing resolution, so we're going to be moving on into the next, the rest later in the year. So even if we don't get this before the end of this, which would have to be this week, which we won't get it this week, we can still get that sometime in November or even December. That's going to be kind of the way that goes with the reauthorization of mandatory price reporting. But like I'm saying, I'm hearing more people say, and I believe it's true too, if we're not going to make it mandatory that your big packers participate in a minimum level of negotiated trade, why should it be mandatory that all of that information be reported? It's, we're always worried about letting too much information out, confidentiality on your packers, because they're a small group, and if there's not, if we're not seeing this much trade, or there's not 3 of them participating in the area, we don't get to see it, like we never get to see anything come out of Colorado. What about these poor feedlots, the few that trade their cattle negotiated? Isn't that proprietary information too? You would think so. And you think, well, there's enough of them to do it. In the Texas Panhandle region, your feedlots that traditionally and typically sell negotiated every week is less than 10. It may be that many or a few more than that in Kansas, but why should they have to tell what they did? So, if we didn't have mandatory price reporting, they could still sell their cattle that way, but your packers wouldn't penalize them and keep them under such a thumb because the price on those cattle was going to go into their formula contracts. So, really mandatory price reporting helps your packers that don't want to participate in a lot of negotiated trade. So why should the feedlots that do participate have that information used against them? And I think we ought to tear down mandatory price reporting if we don't get this Cattle Price Discovery and Transparency Act. But I'm going to ask a favor from my Arkansas Feeder Flash gang. Your Senator Bozeman is the one that's holding this up. He continues, he's a ranking member on the Ag Committee. He's the one that voted for it, but basically said he wasn't for it, but he wasn't going to put up too big a fight. But he is throwing hurdles in front of this thing every time he gets a chance. I think you should light up the switchboard at Senator John Bozeman's office there in D.C. He's working for you, not necessarily for Tyson. And some people may argue about that, but he's working for you too. And you should have just as strong of an influence as any big outfit should have. But light up the switchboard on Senator John Bozeman's office, you Arkansasians. I'm asking you because, we used to have Pat Roberts holding things up because he was the chairman of the Ag Committee in Kansas, and he He bowed to the Kansas Livestock Association, whatever they wanted to do. He held up anything like this before. Well, he finally got too old and they went on, and then he became a paid lobbyist there in D.C. He didn't go back to the land of Oz. Now we've got Senator Bozeman that's holding things up. But, you know, if we don't get Cattle Price Discovery and Transparency Act, I don't think those who support it should continue to support mandatory price reporting. Let's talk about your board for last week. October live cattle futures. Monday was up 22 cents. Tuesday was up 57. Wednesday was down 42. Thursday was down $1.02. And Friday was down 60 cents. With your October live cattle contracts ending the week at 144.25, down $1.25 for the week. December ended the week at 148.55, which was down 242. Your September feeder cattle, and I realize there's not a lot of play in there, but I like to talk about the current stuff. September feeder cattle, Monday was up 75 cents, Tuesday was down $1.15, Wednesday down 62, Thursday up 2 cents, and Friday down 7 cents. Your September feeder cattle contract ended the week at 178.12. That was down $1.08. October ended at 178.35, down 290. Corn was very volatile throughout the week, but ended the week just a half a cent a bushel lower than it was the end of the previous week at 676 3/4. Beans were down 22 3/4 cents for the week at 14.25 3/4, and those are both the new crop contracts there that I'm talking about. But talk about your fat cattle market. We saw more trade on a higher market. We continue to see that, and that's why I think we should have a minimum level of negotiated trade. But the more negotiated trade we see, the higher the market is. The less negotiated trade we see, the lower the market is. Almost always. But 84,700 head just through Thursday, and we had more trade on Friday, so it's going to be pushing close to that 100,000. But your live prices last week ranged from 142 to 148, $1 to $2 higher. Your weighted average on live sales, live steers, 144.55. That'd be up around $1.75, but it's not totaled yet. We'll see what the week has in store after we add in Friday's stuff, and it's going to be a bit higher than that. Your dress sales, 226 to 234, $4 higher. And your weighted average on dress steers is 229.03, up around $2.50 there. Friday we had trade. Of course, Colorado's confidential. We can't let out anything that those few packers are doing, especially when only 2 of them trade or 1. Iowa, 5,600 head sold on Friday, confirmed. 41,300 head for the week. That is huge for them. 144 to 148 live was all we had on Friday. Nebraska sold 1,600, 28,300 for the week up through Thursday, and then I think there was some more trade late on Friday that'll be thrown in there too when we total them all up for the week. But live sales 144 in Nebraska on Friday, dress sales 228 to 228.50. I heard there was some 232 late in Nebraska on some really fat cattle. Kansas didn't have any confirmed sales on Friday, 10,400 for the week. Texas had 500 at 143, which was the market in Texas, which was $1 higher, 143, not very far from where the North is trading now. And 12,400 head in Texas, pure negotiated cash. That is a bunch for them. We get over 9 or 10,000 in Texas, and that is big negotiated trade. Box beef cutout values were lower again. Choice cuts weighted average for last week was down 471 at 250.05 on choice cuts. Select down 708 compared to the previous week's weighted average at 224.14. Your choice select spread on the weighted average for last week on all the sales was just under $26. And that's on a pretty good movement of what we get to see of spot negotiated sales, 765 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Talk about your slaughter. People were expecting it to be a bit lighter, but it was still just as big as the impressive week the week before, 667,000, and that's on a light Saturday slaughter of 33,000. But that's 667,000 head harvested. That was steady with the previous week's harvest, and 24,000 more than the same week a year ago. Talk about what else is going on. K-State Beef Stocker Day is coming up here September the 29th. And if you want an opportunity to meet up with old cattle friends and make new cattle friends and make contacts and learn some things and have an open mind about what you can learn in the industry, listen to discussions on cattle economic outlook, improving efficiencies and health. And then after that, they're going to have the Cutting Bulls Lament, which is they're going to have a gathering there. They're going to have mountain oysters and lots of them and other refreshments. But going to be right there at the Stocker facility there in the Little Apple or Manhattan, Kansas there. So don't miss the K-State Beef Stocker Day. And Dr. Blasey puts on great programs. Talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DV auction ended the week at 177.11. That was up 62 cents compared to the end of the previous week. And cash feeders in your sale barns were very uneven last week. Early in the week, it was steady to $4 lower for the most part, but then from Wednesday on, it was steady to $4 higher. That had some to do with your feeder guys seeing the fat cattle trade that was starting to come in higher. It had more to do with the trends from the previous week, and when we saw the market kind of flip-flop from the previous week, because previous week we saw your prices drop off late in the week, so they were propped back up this week, but that doesn't mean the prices were any higher than the early week sales. But you talk about some markets that happened late in the week. How about on Saturday at Fort Scott Livestock, Fort Scott, Kansas? They sold 57 head of steers, weighed 845 at 176.25 on Saturday. That's pretty impressive. Talk about your Zoetta stick-out sale of the day late last week, and it was on Friday at Bluegrass Stockyards, Richmond, Kentucky. Man, they have good sales there. 1,250 head of feeder receipts there on Friday, including 205 head. Now this would be cattle put together on their final report. There was 205 7-weight steers that averaged 747, and they had a weighted average price of 174.25. That would have been $2 higher than the previous week. They had 400 head of 9-weight steers at Bluegrass Stockyards in Richmond. They averaged 938 with a weighted average price of 165.53. Stick out sale were some 9-weight steers there, but one consignment in Richmond was 119 steers that weighed 965 and bring $166, guys. Then you got to put considerable wheels under them to get them somewhere to feed. Talk about some other individual quotes. How about Cottonwood Livestock Auction in Cottonwood, Idaho? 52 head of steers weighed 886 at 175 in Idaho. And the best quote that I saw anywhere late last week or the end of the week, your Mackerson no BS top quote for the day was Winter Livestock Auction in Winter, South Dakota. They sold 66 steers, weighed 930 pounds at 187.35. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.